The Rubicon, starring Jeremy Winston, in 3, 2, 1.
Jeremy Winston with the Rubicon. You are listening to Advent Sports Network, and I have my good friend James Lewis, host of the Lance J Radio Show. And what we're going to do today, we're just going to get a host of responses to the topic and the hashtag #OscarsSoWhite. I'm sure every single person listening, if you have access to Facebook, you are familiar with the controversy around the Oscars not nominating any actor of color in the primary award categories of Best Actor, Best Female Actor, and so forth. And this has prompted Jada Pinkett Smith to respond by calling on African Americans to boycott and says it's about time. And this is a very interesting issue, and so I'm going to just get a lot of responses from around Facebook and from my friends. And we'll start off with you, I would say the inventor or the godfather of this Advent Sports Network, and get your perspective. Tell us your thoughts on #OscarsSoWhite.
Well, I think that, and thanks for having me on the show, Jeremy. I think that Jada Pinkett Smith was right conceptually, that Hollywood has shown a history of being biased towards not only African Americans but people of color in general. I mean, our Latino brothers and sisters go through the same issue, and it's prevalent in Hollywood. It goes down from the pay, it goes down to what people have to do to get into the industry. So I believe that she was right. I just believe that she was right for the wrong reasons. She was clearly supporting her husband, Will Smith, who made the movie Concussion, which was a good movie, but it wasn't Oscar-worthy. It wasn't transcendent. It wasn't stellar. It was a typical solid Will Smith performance where you have some really highs, but you have a lot of lows. There are a lot of gaps in the writing script. So she's obviously thinking about herself and about her husband. It's very clear in her statement and with her actions.
Gotcha. Okay. So all right. So Aunt Viv from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air went off on her rant about saying that this was all about her and that nobody else understands. And, that has its place. But one of the most compelling and interesting perspectives, and I think that we have to consider, John Mahoney, who is a voter for the Academy Awards, and most of the listeners may remember him as the older father with the cane from Frasier. And he said this in L.A. Times on January 23rd. And he said, I couldn't imagine changing a vote because of race. He said, it's about art. It's a performance. It's about the performances that moves you. I could not imagine to myself saying, oh my God, they're all white. I better get rid of one of these and put a person of color in. You just don't do that. I'm quoting literally what he said. He said, you vote and you hope that you come up with something that's fair. And I think that there is logic to that. I mean, or do we want people to vote what they feel is the best and then come back and say, oh, shoot, person of color, let me go find a black movie and put somebody, or somebody of color and put them in there? I mean, is that what we want? What's the solution here?
So I think that that's one of the dumbest discussions that I've heard recently on Facebook and in the blog sphere, on Twitter. Why are we as African Americans in 2016 waiting for Caucasian-based Hollywood to throw us crumbs? It's really that slave mentality. It's that house Negro mentality. I don't need, and Ice Cube kind of said it best. He said, he basically, to paraphrase what he said, they knew that the NWA movie was an excellent movie. It was a great biopic of NWA. It was one of the most successful movies of the year. They don't need the validation of Caucasian people to say that it's good for them to know that it's good. So I would implore my brethren and sister in listening, Grammys, Oscars, Tonys, all of that stuff, if they don't want to give African Americans the props that they deserve, let's not make them any more money. Let's just opt out, do our own thing. We don't need MASA to come in and say that you Negroes have tap danced and crooned around for us to our liking, so we're going to give you an award. One of the things you said when we were talking on my show, on the show that aired Monday, we talked about how Denzel's performance in Malcolm X is one of the best performances, perhaps in the history of the acting genre. You and I both know that there's absolutely no chance that he was going to win an Oscar for portraying Malcolm X. It's like Pete Rose, to throw out a sports take. Pete Rose isn't in the Hall of Fame, but we know that he's a Hall of Famer. He doesn't need the jacket or the bust in Cooperstown. He's the best hitter in the history of the game. So these movies and talented bodies of art that African Americans have done, we don't need somebody to stamp and say that it's okay and it's conceptually fine. We need to be comfortable in our own space. And one parting shot that I'll take for those listening, not only do we not need people of Caucasian descent to co-sign on what we're doing, we need to stop making foolishness like Empire and supporting that trash that portrays African American people as worthless and all of the stereotypes that are actually why we don't get the play and respect that we deserve in Hollywood in the first place.
Well, listen, man, you opened up a whole nother can of worms with that statement right there, man. And I want to unpack it, but I want to get some more people in on this conversation. It's so compelling, man. So I appreciate your input, man, and just continue to listen to what everybody else has to say. Thanks a lot, James.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Looking forward to hearing the show.
Absolutely. All right, bye.
The Rubicon is an ASN Talk Radio expansion franchise about current events, news, and geopolitics. All footage is taped in Dayton, Ohio, and produced at Advent Sports Network's downtown studios in the lovely Emerald City of Seattle, Washington.
This broadcast is copyrighted by Advent Sports Network for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this broadcast or of any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of without the express written consent of the CEO or Executive Vice President of Advent Sports Network is strictly prohibited. I am very serious. Thou shalt not steal.
All right, this is the Rubicon, Jeremy Winston, and right now we're getting our second input. We have Reverend Dr. Tawan Bailey, who is the senior pastor at Wayman Chapel AME and St. John AME Church in Pennsylvania, and he's currently working on his doctorate of ministry, but we're just going to go ahead and claim it and refer to him as Reverend Doctor. I hope that's all right with you.
Amen. It is certainly all right with me.
Oh, well, listen, he's actually in the middle of his intensive studies, and so he's offered to give us a few moments to talk about this topic, to get your perspective on the topic Oscar So White. I'm sure you are familiar with the controversy that has ensued because the Academy Awards did not nominate any person of color in the major awards, and this is for second year in a row, and the hashtag Oscar So White went viral and trending all over the place, and then Jada Pinkett Smith called for African Americans to boycott or considering doing her own, and wanting to get your perspective as a pastor and a leader of so many African Americans on this issue, Oscar So White.
Man, my input and my take is that we have been fighting for a seat at this table for many years. This is not the first, piece of evidence of racial divide among the Academy that we've seen. I think the greater tragedy past, our being left out of, the Academy on this level is that we look to and have often looked to the race that is quite often viewed as superior to non-white society, and we look to those standards in order to affirm us in our talents, our giftings, and in our art forms. the greater tragedy is that we are not sure enough and certain enough of ourselves and comfortable enough in our own being and in our own skin to continue to hold our heads up high regardless. This is not a new thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we have so assimilated ourselves and adapted into a westernized, mainstream white culture that we feel that what we bring to the table is not or is no longer validated among ourselves from our own communities, but we seek that affirmation from the group that is quite often viewed as superior to blacks. And we've been fighting, like I said earlier, for a seat at this table for a really, really long time. And I think that, and I may be paraphrasing, I'm sure, but I think that Viola Davis made mention that if there are no black films being produced, then what are we voting for? Mm-hmm. And to that end, I think that our culture, those of us who are non-white or not part of that establishment or that persuasion, I think that we have enough muscle, we have enough strength, we have enough resources, and certainly we have enough social influence and economic influence in America to stand on our own 2 feet, to affirm ourselves among ourselves so that we are no longer put in a position where we feel obligated to seek out affirmation of our gifting and our talents by a group who, not all, but some who feel superior to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's very interesting. My previous guest, James Lewis, who he had similar thoughts, is that there should be a point where there's no longer seeking the affirmation or the nod, so to speak, from the non-African American community. Well, listen, Reverend Bailey, I appreciate it, and Reverend Dr. Bailey, forgive me, but I know you're working hard in your studies, so I don't want to take too much of your time. But thank you so much for
I appreciate you,
some
Dr.
words.
Winston.
No, not at all, buddy, not at all. But listen, hope to have you back on the Rubicon. This is Advent Sports Network, and have a lot of compelling conversations, so we'd love to have you back on very soon.
Certainly, man. It would be my honor.
You're on The Ticket with Advent Sports Network, home of Falcon Pride, One-on-One with MJ, and The Lance J Radio Show.
It was embarrassing. On offense, the Cavs did what they normally do. They just dribbled and stood around. Nobody set a pick. Nobody cut to the basket. They just waited for the clock to run down, and then they took a bad shot. Golden State, conversely, you look at the way that their ball moves. You look at Draymond Green just putting in work in the high post, knowing how to work that high post and work that pick and pop with Steph Curry is just beautiful. And then you have Klay Thompson running from end to end off of screens and getting open looks. And then you have to worry about Harrison Barnes, who's a slasher. If you just watch the choreography of the Golden State Warriors, it's beautiful. It's poetry in motion. What the Cavs do is it's awful. It's the antithesis of what the Spurs and what the Golden State Warriors do.
Sports talk, ministry, excellence. You are listening to the Lance J Radio Show.
Continuing with the Rubicon, we have Charita Boseman, who is going to be giving her perspective and her response to the Oscars So White controversy that has filled our airways and the media for some time. And so, Charita, just give us your sense of this controversy, and how do you think it is resolved? How do you think that we as a country can look at a organization that is so celebrated as Oscars, the Academy, and address the issues for these past 2 years where the African American was nominated for the top spot? I mean, is that a problem, or is that just somewhat a mathematical result of limited movies or limited roles with African Americans?
I definitely think there's an issue with roles in films that are being produced by blacks, with blacks in them. I just had this conversation recently. When you go to see a movie that's predominantly African American cast, it becomes a black film. When you go to see any other rom-com or comedy show where most of the people in the cast are white, there's not an issue. It's just a movie. It's not that white movie I'm going to go see. So I think we live in a white world. We know that the majority of the people in this world are of color, but the mentality of the people who live in this world, it is white. So they don't see the color white, and they don't think when they go to cast their votes on a movie, did I choose that black person? Because they never have to think that way. It's always white. We have to always think of color. We're thought of as a color when we go interview for a job. That person might be thought of as a color. They're looked at as a color. They're not just looked at as an applicant, that black guy or that black girl that works there, not just John or Susie. So it is the world in which we live in, and things are just different for us. And that's shown in this particular boycotting issue. There were some amazing movies with some amazing black actors and actresses that were looked over this past year as well as last year. I can't imagine that Idris Elba didn't perform well. I just recently saw Creed. I think he did a great job, and I think it's very interesting that someone who had a comeback career actually came back, got that award, and there was no mention of the director. There was no mention of Michael B. Jordan. We're just not looked at as part of the pool.
Okay, so I mean, part of my responsibility is, for the host is to push back and ask probing questions. I spoke with you briefly about it, and my listeners, you listening to it, you know about the quote that John Mahoney gave, who was the father on Frasier, who said that he simply votes for the person or the actors that he felt were the best, and doesn't really think of race. And he kind of shudders at the thought that the response to that should be that he needs to go back and look at his ballot or whatever they use and make sure an African American is in there, because now he's voting on a different principle, not necessarily on good acting, but on just including someone of color. I mean, is that what we want? Do we want people to now employ the Rooney Rule of hey, you have to have at least one African American as your best lead actor? What is it that we want? What is the response of this in this?
I don't know what that exact answer should be, but I do think that if there were more of us shown on television, more of us in the films and in movies, we would have a better chance. We're not casted in these films. We're not thought of as directors and producers unless we're filming about ourselves. So I think we're just not shown. We're just not there. We're not there, so they don't see it that way. As a black, go ahead.
No, you finish, please.
I was just going to say, as a black person voting, we probably would notice that. I mean, those are things that we would notice if there was some diversity that was chosen there. And I do think, yes, it goes off of who did the best and who, played the best role. But you can't say that not one African American did a great job in any of these films.
So my thought is this. I mean, my one question is, so you mentioned Creed, or and another one that a lot of people spoke about was Straight Outta Compton, right?
Yeah.
John Mahoney said that he looks at he used the words, which movie or actor moved me. I think those were his words to say, he moved me. I can't imagine that I'm sure he's north of 80 years old, is going to be moved emotionally by a story of a former drug dealer out of the streets of Compton. So now is it insincere or is it unfair that he watches that movie and isn't moved by it? But he may look at I don't know what one of the movies that are, I think Carol is one, or even I can't remember all the actors that were nominated, but clearly they were white, and he sees that he's moved. The idea is that these are things that are personal to him. So is it a statement of racism, or is it a statement of identification, being able to identify with specific roles in movies?
I think these are stories that don't resonate with him. These are stories that don't resonate with a lot of people who are choosing the films that, win these awards. And I think for the majority of African Americans who saw Straight Outta Compton, it resonated with us. We saw ourselves in that film. We saw the struggles that we've gone through. Or we look at Beast of No Nation and we see, people who look like us who are struggling, and we see the passion that's delivered in a role. So it's very different when you are close to it, and I don't think that a lot of the folks who are choosing these awards are close to stories that are about us or stories that include us as roles and characters. Right.
Well, listen, I appreciate your input. This is, like I said, we're getting a number of responses on this topic. I want to encourage you and everyone else to continue to check out the podcast, the Rubicon, where we discuss a bunch of. So I think you will enjoy it. So topics like this and so many others. And so thank you for your input. We're going to have you on again.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
No problem.
Care.
Take care. All right.
Advent Sports Network would like to congratulate Michaela Arthurs on becoming a charter member of the ASN Mentorship and Development Institute. Listen to Michaela cover sports from the perspective of a student athlete on her show, Falcon Pride, taped at Pine Forge Academy in Pennsylvania.
Arise and give God glory. This is the command of gospel artist Kimberly Boseman. She commands everyone to give God praise in her hit single entitled Garment of Praise.
Now is the time for your garment of praise.
This song gives a bold command to praise God no matter what. Continue to praise God as you also enjoy Kimberly Boseman's other hit single entitled God Chose Me.
God chose me.
Put on your garment of praise with gospel artist Kimberly Boseman and experience a new level of praise and worship. Check out our download locations to purchase gospel artist Kimberly Boseman's music. You can also find out more about Kimberly Boseman on her website at KimberlyBoseman.com. Experience the power of God through the dynamic ministry of Kimberly Boseman today.
Consciously or subconsciously, I never think about race. I mean, that's just a flat-out lie. I mean, this entire country is built on white superiority to blacks. I mean, that's just a fact. I mean, that's not something, that's not an opinion. That's not something I'm making up. And we're talking about 400 years of brainwashing two different groups of people, one into thinking they're inferior and one into thinking they're superior. And you just don't undo that in 60 or 70 years or even 100 years. It's just part of our society, and it's ingrained in it. And that's something I think that as African Americans, I'm not saying you accept that, but you understand that that's the lane in which we operate, and you figure out either how to maneuver in that lane or how to create your own lane. Right. And so I like to think, I mean, look, I mean, just by pure statistics and numbers, we know that there are far more movies being made that would even be for consideration by white directors, majority white cast, white stars. And these films usually have the bigger budgets, the better writers, the better actors, the better actresses. And so it's not, really shocking that the majority of the actors or people being nominated for different categories are going to be white. I mean, that's just America. I mean, that's just the how it's set up. I mean, we're just now getting shows on TV again, like Blackish, and every 5 or 6 years we get a new show that really features a really good actor and a really good writers, and it's laid out nicely. And the same thing happens in movies. So I mean, if you don't have the budget, if you aren't able to hire the best writers and the best costume people and the best special effects people, your movie's probably not going to be as good as the person who can do those things. So I do think there's a realistic factor that, look, this is just, white supremacy, and I don't mean that necessarily in a negative connotation, just the reality of what America is, rising to the top. And then we're always kind of pushing and trying to break through those barriers. And that's why it's a big deal when we have these major wins.
So you say this may or may not be racism in this case.
Look, for some voters who just are flat out overt racist, then yeah, for those people, yeah. But I would say it's more so it's racial in the sense that if all things being equal, and I can choose between this person or that person, I think 9 out of 10 times, if the majority of your audience or your judges, the people making the decisions are white, they're going to choose the white actor or actress because they identify with that person differently. They identify with the mannerisms differently. I mean, I think we have to accept and understand that we may not be different genetically per se, but we are different culturally. And so the things that I see Denzel Washington do in a movie that I pick up that are subtle in the way he says a word, in the way he looks at a person, the way he carries himself, are maybe things that are common or something that we see regularly within the black culture that maybe a white person wouldn't even pick up on or appreciate. So the bigger problem is, why don't we have more racial diversity and within the people making the decisions, the people judging it? Because that's really how you change the paradigm, is because it has to shift when you have a different mix of people. That's why the Supreme Court, in affirming affirmative action on a number of different occasions, said, look, we're not saying we're just putting people in here to fill a quota. We're saying that the best education, people learn the best when they're in an environment with different people, and not just racial, but socioeconomic, racial, religious. All those things allow people to learn better and create more. So if we had more diversity, I think, within the academy, the people making the decisions, I think when we had this problem, I mean, you would still have more white actors winning because that's just the numbers. But I think there'll be more appreciation for other bodies' work.
So, man, great points, man. So if I were to conclude what you're saying, moving to the next step, the solution may not be what Jada Pinkett Smith is advocating, which is boycotting. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we show up. We show up and we push our way in.
And we make, I mean, see, that's the thing. Again, when I talk about cultures, one thing that when black people are angry, we're not really passive aggressive. That's not really who we are. We are straight in your face and we get aggressive. And I'm not saying that means aggression doesn't mean violence or hitting or punching or harming someone. It means standing up and looking someone in the face and saying, this is what we want. Either give it to us.
Martin Luther King was aggressive.
Exactly. Martin Luther King was aggressive. But also so was Malcolm X. Gandhi in his own way was aggressive. There's a way to be aggressive and a way to do it in a way that gives you more results than just this boycott. How long is this going to last? I mean, and I don't care what anyone says. One person who I generally never agree with everything someone says, but I generally can find something that I do agree with anybody. And the mom from the real Aunt Viv from Fresh Prince. I don't know if
the real Aunt Viv. That's a little bit of a slight there.
Right. And what she said, I think she was motivated maybe a little bit differently. I don't know what her motives were, but the one thing that she said was true is I do have to question Jada's motives. If Will Smith won Best Actor, but no other black actors were nominated for anything, would she still be saying boycott?
In 49 BC, Julius Caesar led an army over the Rubicon River from Gaul into northern Italy. By doing so, he crossed the point of no return and declaration of war against the Roman Empire. Centuries later, you are listening to Jeremy Winston reach his point of no return only on Advent Sports, the Rubicon.
Briscoe was one of the first black quarterbacks to start. He played actually for the Broncos. And this guy was a great player. I mean, again, mobile, had an arm on him, but the only thing that was held against him was that he was black. James, I like to call it Cam Newton situation, the discount double standard. Okay, that's what I call it, man. Straight up, just the discount double standard. I don't know if you saw this thing. It was online somewhere. I saw it where Aaron Rodgers is doing his discount double check move after scoring a touchdown, and somebody said, "Oh, isn't it great how he celebrates?" And then somebody showed Cam Newton doing his celebration and said, "You know, we need to get these wild thugs or this wild stuff out of the league."
Advent Sports Network is a 503c charity. All advertising proceeds from the Lance J Radio Show are used to fund nationwide youth sports programs and the Advent Sports Network Mentorship and Development Institute, which provides opportunities for young aspiring Christian journalists to cover athletic events and produce sports-related programming.
Here on the Rubicon, and we are continuing our discussion about Oscar So White, this hashtag that has taken over our conversation about race relations, and of course everyone is familiar with this issue. I've interviewed a few people, and now I have Twyla Grider on the phone, and she's going to talk about this as well. Thanks for being on, Twyla.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well. So. All right, so I'm just going to lay this out. My audience has listened to a few people talk about this already. We want your perspective. So we've got the shorthand version. We've got Jada Pinkett Smith boycott, right? We've got Aunt Viv to Jada Pinkett Smith, you're crazy. And then we've got John Mahoney, the father from Frasier, saying, "Listen, hey, I'm voting the best actor. I'm not thinking about race relations." And you got this whole big issue, and then of course you've got the Oscars, who have had 2 years in a row without an African American director, without an African American lead, male or female actor. So all of those major roles, they've been snubbed, so to speak. Is this an example of racism in 2016, which we've seen in so many ways? Or is this just the numbers? Is this just the fact that, there are not a lot of good movies with the African American leads or good movies with directors these past 2 years? Is it just statistically the reality, or is it something else?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this actually a lot, and I think it's a little more complex than we're making it. We're making it very like black or white, cut and dry.
Right.
I think part of it is that art in general is very subjective, and theater is an art, and so it's subjective. And so now you have this panel of people, the voters of the Oscars, who are majority white, looking at these films, and it may not move them because they're detached from it. It's hard for them to look at a black film about black issues per se and feel the same way a black person would feel.
My perspective is that this is about your ability to relate to a role. When I look at, for instance, one of my favorite movies of all time is Malcolm X. Right, and it is, for me, it is a great movie. I mean, it is a great movie. Malcolm X plays Malcolm X. He embodies Malcolm X.
Actually, yeah, I think that was the film. Yeah.
That was the film. Yeah, I know that was the film. He was snubbed. He won for Training Day. He won Best Actor for Training Day, which he was, a crooked cop. Now let me just say, he acted really well in Training Day. I mean, like his demeanor was authentic. It was an authentic kind of thug, West Coast thug mentality. I mean, his work, people who play thugs, sometimes you could tell, they're just acting. They're not really, they're going over the top. They say dog too much of the way they talk. There was something sincere, and so maybe it was, Oscar worthy, maybe not. But the point is that there does seem to be this idea that African Americans win when they play this subservient role, or they play, an imbecile or just a bad person, a villain. And so, I mean, but the
I
idea
think that too is because white people have been conditioned to see black people in these roles. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where you had white people in blackface or black people kind of shucking and jiving. That wasn't that long ago.
No, it wasn't at all.
Yes, they've been conditioned to see black people in a certain way. And so what we have to do is, I feel like we just have to continue to make great films. And, I don't want to say not take it so personally, but it is what it is. But the more work we get out there that is more substantive and that deals with black issues in a real way, and people keep putting it out there, then they become conditioned. It's not going to happen overnight. And then the other thing is there does need to be more black people that vote, but I don't know if it should be a quota because, that gets a little hairy.
What the president said, of course, everyone probably knows by now the president of the Academy is an African American female, which is obviously a great, it's great to have in this type of situation. And she said, we're going to be focused by 2020 to have significantly more voting minorities in the Academy. And to me, really, that's the only solution. I mean, I think there's one or two options. I mean, the one option is, the African minorities in general just say, forget it. We're done with the Academy Awards. Now, I don't think that is a very likely solution, because you're going to try to, herd all the the 13%, population in this country of African Americans to say we're going to boycott, or you're going to say we're going to win by getting in and voting our people in. I mean, there are many ways to do it, and I think that one of the ways to address these issues is to do that. And so I'm hopeful that they would be able to be successful in getting more African Americans to vote, who can connect to these ideas. Because John Mahoney, the father from Frasier, he's not going to connect with South Central. What's the movie? Straight Outta Compton. He's not going to connect with that.
Exactly.
He may say, "Oh, that was a good movie," but he's not going to see it as necessarily artistically unique.
No. And I think, like you said, I think you're right. Now I'm thinking about it. There does need to be more African Americans voting, but I think it still gets a little hairy as to how you break that down. And it's not just African Americans. I mean, it just needs to be more diverse. It needs to reflect our population.
Right. There we go. And I think that is, and I don't know what the percentage is. Like we said, we tend to say African Americans represent 13% of the population, maybe more. But so do we get 13%? Who knows? But I do want to just say this kind of finally in closing. And this is just my word, if you don't mind me just, because I think you'll probably be the last person. My closing point is to the Academy. Obviously, I'm sure the Academy is listening to my show, so I know that they're going to get what I'm saying. But whenever you purport yourself to be the top of any industry, you have the responsibility to be equitable. Being at the top, of course, requires you get a lot of the spoils. You win a lot because you get a lot of the attention. But when you get the attention, you also have the responsibility. So it is the responsibility of the Academy to make sure that, yes, maybe, concussion Maybe Will Smith didn't deserve a Best Actor for. I haven't seen the movie. Maybe Straight Outta Compton didn't deserve one of the best films. Maybe the guy from Creed didn't deserve to be nominated, or Idris Elba for Beast of All Nation. Maybe that wasn't the case. But there's significant doubt that all of these outstanding movies are not being voted in because they're not good. It seems to me that they're voted in because people can't identify. And as a leader of an industry, you have to make sure that your voters identify. So that's my word to the Academy. That's my word for the Rubicon. This is Twyla Grider. Thank you for being on. Thank you for offering your perspective. Me. Absolutely. Would love to have you on again to talk about some more topics, all right?
All right.
Advent Sports Network is a 503c charity. All advertising proceeds from the Lance J Radio Show are used to fund nationwide youth sports programs and the Advent Sports Network Mentorship and Development Institute, which provides opportunities for young aspiring Christian journalists to cover athletic events and produce sports-related programming.